This was pitched to me as a faith at home workshop that we could do around technology. We've never done this with younger kids before. Tanya and I usually were called in to do this because Remedy Live, the organization that we started, has a parenting arm called Trends in Teens. And by the very nature of that name, it's for teens. So we're talking more about the dangerous apps and the things that teens are up to when it comes to technology. But today, we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about all age of children. So we're going to look at the landscape and the fact that technology is a part of every component of our life nowadays. It's pretty difficult, unless you live in Montana, to escape the woes of cellular and Wi-Fi based technology. It's created what's called the largest generation gap in the history of the human race. And this is closing as you, as Gen Xers, become parents. But for a while there, when we first started Remedy, most parents didn't even know what a Facebook was, did not even know how to log into a web page or download an app. This is, of course, 2007 was the creation of the smartphone. So some parents had those phones, of course, before their kids did, but kids were already using the internet in a significant way to create a subculture. So we'll talk about the generation gap a bit today. And then, of course, a lot of parents, even still today, are oblivious to the wired culture their friends are immersed in. 2016 data says that only 16% of homes use parental restrictions. When you see a number like that, that's devastating because with the day and age that we're in, with people using the internet for malicious reasons and trying to connect with young kids for all kinds of harmful purposes, 16% of us would never say we're not going to lock our doors at night. You know, we'd never say that we're going to let predators come into our houses, into our bedrooms. We would never do that. That just doesn't make sense.
And, you know, I think, too, it's really easy to say, well, I feel protected. I feel like we've done everything that we can do to make sure that our devices are safe. Well, with that 16%, chances are your children are seeing over other children's shoulders of what they're finding on their device. We have a 5th grader who is open to what, you know, one of her friends in the neighborhood is seeing. So that conversation is almost even more important than the controls and different controls that we can have on
choices they'll make, yeah. Because we have a saying in our home, and I use it a lot at Remedy: are you choosing your friends, or are your friends choosing you? And this is a very dangerous thing when it comes to technology, because exactly what Tanya just said. Lastly, our only goal today is to educate you. Yes, it's going to be a little scary at times because it is a scary wired world, but we want you to be educated because we want you to become engaged parents. And by the end of our time today, you're going to hear me talk about Wi-Fi safety the same way that I would talk to you about home insurance or about auto insurance. You know, you wouldn't drive around your car with an uninsured vehicle. Today, we need to be thinking that significantly about the issues of technology. So we're going to get deep into that. But first, I want to talk to you as parents. And I don't know you all. I know some of you. We've seen a significant change here in the last few years. The majority of this generation's parents, your kids, are being raised by Gen X parenting. And a Gen X parent is a different kind of parent. If the millennials of the beginning of the stage were being parented by boomers, the boomers were a little bit hands-off-ish, you know, hey, it's up to you to choose your religion. It's up to you to choose whatever you want to do. Because they were ignorant about technology, a lot of things were happening. A perfect example is grandma buying little 9-year-old Joey an iPod Touch because Joey wanted that. But grandma was unaware that the iPod Touch had a Wi-Fi enabled setting and that Joey now could search for anything he wanted on that Wi-Fi based device. And so Joey at 9 years old, as well as many of his friends, were introduced to online pornography because they are children with sexual beings. You know, they have a desire to understand sex like we all do. And so they started on their own using iPod Touches, PlayStations, Xboxes, and anything that was Wi-Fi enabled. Well, Gen X parents are a little bit more savvy. They've heard about the dangers, and of course, in many ways, if you're a Gen Xer, which I am, you're still a kid. You know, you're strategically immature. You might be in your late 40s, but you still like to get down and have fun. And you might even have your own PlayStation that you play Battlefront on at nauseum. But you are different. You might be imparting a realism into your child where it's not you can do anything you want, but instead you're really exhibiting to them what it looks like to be smart, to be discerning. And today, that's why we're doing this, is because some of you as parents, you wouldn't be here if you didn't care about what your children were taking into their brains when it came to the technology that they've got available to them. So this millennial shift is happening quickly, and we're grateful that you're here today. What do we know? Well, the world isn't what it was. Our culture is highly sexualized now. And it was 20 years ago, too. It just, we didn't notice it as much because, you know, the sitcom might have suggestive material. I remember Love Boat. Anyone remember the show Love Boat? You know, they were all having whoopee, whatever that meant, right? And everyone knew what that meant. My grandma would say, turn that off. They just said whoopee. You know, well, today, they're not only having whoopee, but they're actually having it right on screen at 8 o'clock in the evening. And you just know that this is a different space of sexualized media. The world is ready to raise your children without your help. There are people right now ready to raise your kids. They will do whatever it takes to market to them the latest, greatest, whatever it is. I think if you've been asleep the last week or so, you didn't hear that the 13 Reasons Why Netflix show is getting a ton of press, right? And Netflix is brilliant because it is great television. It's just a really bad message. But it's just doing really, really well because Netflix wants to raise your kids. And oftentimes parents are saying, that's okay. Netflix can raise my kids with, you know, the children's programming. I just don't want them looking at the bad stuff. Well, do you know how to restrict that? Do you know how to take care of something that's coming into your home with all kinds of suggestive materials? Well, the world is waiting and will indeed take advantage of raising your kids. So today, we're going to talk about parenting on purpose. And we've talked about that every week here at FMC Parenting, that we want to parent on purpose. And then we're going to talk about the fact that restrictions on devices must be partnered with conversations. We are not the kind of parents today that say, well, just because we have parental restrictions and circle the wagons, everything's going to be okay in our home. Can you talk a bit about, sweetie, how we've done this conversation? Even the conversation we just had a couple days ago about the 13 Reasons Why.
Yeah, I think really to start with, you know, the curiosity that you are experiencing is very normal. You know, what you're wanting to know about, it's normal. God made us, you know, to be attracted to the opposite sex. And so really affirming them wherever you can and in that, but also just opening that up so that they feel comfortable talking about it. And that's the biggest challenge that we have, because our oldest just does not want to talk about anything like that. And so anything that you can do.
She's getting better, though.
To open that up and, just make them feel like they're not getting in trouble. But, you know, how did that make you feel when you saw that? And how do you feel like that honors God in looking at that? And what do you think Jesus would say about that? So just asking, the more questions that we can ask, the more they teach themselves in the process of what they're seeing.
Sure, and I think, too, that the power, if nothing else you hear today, the power of listening to your child creates a bridge of trust. And the bridge of trust is where you're going to be able to springboard off into technology, into drugs, into sex with, you know, the world telling us to have sex with everything. You'll be able to use that bridge of trust to have these conversations about all these hard topics, not just technology. And so, you know, we do that a lot. And every child is different, right? You know, our oldest wants to do that, you know, literally at 10 o'clock at night before she should be asleep for already a half an hour. Whereas our other kids, it's right after they get into the van after school. Then they want to talk about everything. You know, Duke wants to do it whenever we're watching a playoff hockey game, which is always frustrating for me. But we do it, right? Because it's important. I love my son. So again, it's about a conversation, and so a great resource. And by the way, I should tell you, all of this is going to be available on FMC Parenting afterwards, not only the video, but all the slides and everything. So you can fall asleep at any point if you want to. But I want to recommend a resource that's really important, and we've given it away here at Fellowship in the past. Some of you have used this book, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. It's a great resource for young kids to talk about porn. I'll say it again. It's a great resource to talk to your children about pornography. It obviously doesn't have pornography in the book, but it talks about the fact that there are bad pictures, and they make us feel bad. And it really is a great, great conversation with your child in a very appropriate way about the content that's out there. Now, when is the right time? When is the right age to have this conversation? Well, I would encourage you, and we might differ on this, but I would encourage you that you should have the conversation at 6 and 7 years of age. You should start talking about this at that age. Why? Well, because again, as Tanya said, the friends that your kids are hanging out with probably have already heard about it. And the worldview of sexuality can either be shared through the 6-year-old that they're friends with or through you as their biblical disciple maker, their parent. And it doesn't have to be weird. I remember the sex talk we had with our daughter. Yeah. It was, remember at the lake? Very fundamental. Boys and girls have different plumbing. Their privates are different. And when they touch, babies are made. Sounds pretty right? That's how it works, right? And that's where we started. So those privates are meant for your husband. It's meant for your wife. And just really basic. Again, Ella couldn't get out of the conversation fast enough. But it allowed us in the months following to talk about it. Now, we were grateful we did, because when the cousins from Canada came to visit, they had a very different version of sex. It was a porn version of sex. And Ella was able to use the tools that we'd given her to say, I don't think so. Mom and Dad had told me the real definition, that God is creator of sex, and sex is for a different purpose.
And I think this conversation it takes the pressure off of us parents so much to feel like we don't have to say it all at once. I think when we started the conversation, I felt like that pressure of, I've got to nail everything in the line and make sure that she knows everything about it. And that really took the pressure off, just starting that conversation, knowing that we can circle back around in 6 months. We can, whenever something comes up, using a teachable moment. So don't let that fear of how is this going to go stop you from just entering into that, because it is fearful. It's scary because you don't always know how it's going to unfold with each child.
Yeah, every kid's different, especially our kids, because they're part Canadian. So we know that your kids are not going to be the same as our kids. So you have to navigate knowing their unique personality. So this book is one easy resource just to get you into the game of having the conversation about the technologies out there, and pornography especially, and good pictures, bad pictures. The next thing I want to encourage you, and I should have admitted this early, some of you will be okay with this, some of you will never come back. I'm an Apple guy, so I use an iPhone, I use an iPad, I use a MacBook. I'm not very smart about anything other than Apple. And I want to be honest about that, because a lot of what I'm going to tell you today, you can find the PC-based definitions online with restrictions and how to use a Droid and all that. But I'm today going to just kind of hit the high points of the Apple world, because this is the world that I live in and that our kids are using. The family plan for us has been a significant thing, because it allows us to be able to really monitor what our kids want in regards to apps. And so this animation just shows you just basically that within our computer, we set up a family plan so that all of our children have to ask when they want to buy something, when they want to download an app, when they want a song. It allows us to be able to categorize them. And then, I select here Duke's profile as an example, and it says, he has to ask to buy. And I want to see Duke's location when he's using his device, in case for some crazy reason he decides to take his iPad to school. Now, my children and our children tell us all the time, well, Susie knows her passcode. I don't care about Susie's passcode. I care about your passcode. So we don't let our children know how they can get into the device. It's a permission thing. They have to earn it. There's a certain part of the day that they can have it, especially if we want to get them to clean their room quickly, or if they indeed want to be able to have some fun on the weekend. So do you want to talk more about how we use the devices? I know that you use them a lot right after school to get some things done.
Well, yeah, we try really hard not to use them during the week, unless if, like what he's saying, there's a chore that needs to be done. But we try and let the weekends be, just a balanced system for us, so that we don't have them all the time. Mm-hmm. And I think it's so important now with kids being so dialed into technology all the time, it's critical for them to be able to be still. It's critical for them to be able to be disconnected and still reside, right, as a person. Yeah. So I find that really important, and that comes with practice. And I know that they use devices at school. I know that the school iPads don't have the controls that we would like for them to have on them. So there are still holes and cracks for what they're seeing at school as well. So,
Yeah.
and then I wanted you to talk about the how pop-ups can be dangerous on apps.
We will, yeah,
Okay.
here in a bit.
Okay, I thought you were going to.
But again, I highly recommend the family plan. Yes, you have to put your credit card in Apple's hands. Apple doesn't need your money, so it's okay. And then you control purchases, you can control downloads. So the family plan is one of the biggest things that I want to make sure I pointed out, because a lot of parents don't realize, especially on iPhones, that that's possible. Let me talk just quickly about what you suggested in regards to apps. The apps your children download are not always what they seem, especially free apps. Now this is a very general statement, and Clinton's common for doing things like this, but a free app is never free, okay? The free app is doing things on your device that you probably don't even know about. Things like providing pop-ups regularly to your children that can take them out of the app into places on the internet that they shouldn't be. Some apps even have built-in browsers. So you may have blocked your browser from being used, but the app browser, which is probably pretty simple in nature, now allows them to still be able to search the web for various things. Another thing that apps do, and this again is not always common, but the #1 search engine in the world is Google. Most of us use it. Google has so much power now in regards to the way the internet's used that Google is often connected to those free apps in some significant way. And the reason why this is important is not because there's going to be a pop-up from Google that's going to be inappropriate. It's that Google is a gateway to more pornography than you can ever imagine. It's not the hardcore websites we always need to block. It's just simply the search engines. And if you don't believe me, you and your spouse later on today can do a search on Google around a hardcore pornographic definition, and you'll see it pop up right there in Google just for the eyes to see. Sure, you can use Safe Search, and you can use Safe Search, but again, if you're using the app, sometimes the app is connected to Google without you even knowing it. I'll give you an example. Math Playground. Sounds innocent. It sounds like a very good app, because I want my daughters and my son to be able to learn how to add. That was something I never learned. So I want them to do that. Well, I didn't know Math Playground was a gateway into Google. So I downloaded onto their device. I had already blocked Google because I knew what Google did, but now Google was a new portal. Brand new secret backdoor portal. And my children didn't discover it first. I was grateful I did, but that could have been huge problems if I hadn't have stumbled on it. So apps aren't always free. It's better to pay for an app, to be honest, because it has a lot more controls on it. But it's also important that if you're going to have an app, you actually download it before your kids do if you don't understand what the app does. And play around with it, and try to break it, and try to search for bad stuff, and try to figure it out. Or, later on in our time together, I'm going to suggest some websites that can do a lot of that for you, and reviews that can be done for parents, so that you don't have to learn all that from scratch, but there are partners out there that have already done the work for you. And sometimes they'll charge you a subscription, but again, you wouldn't go without house insurance, you wouldn't go without auto insurance, so we have to do the same thing when it comes to some of these controls. Well, next I want to show you a quick animation. Again, all these videos will be on the website later, so you can just watch them and do it on your own computer. But this is how I control parental restrictions, and hopefully the screen will pop up and make it easier to see. Parental controls are super essential on your devices, okay? Because this allows your children now to not navigate the way they want. So what I'm doing is I'm going into parental controls, and I'm clicking on and off things like limits to what applications. I don't let my kids on any applications except the web browser, Safari in this case. Then I can actually go into the web tab, and I can say I want to restrict all websites except for the websites I choose. That way my child can't go to any website unless I've already approved it. And in this case, I can show you just quickly how you can even add a website. If you want to have a website that they can access that you know is safe, then you can add that here. But if they don't have it approved, then they can't access it. I want to restrict the types of different things that they're going to be able to see. I'm going to limit time limits. Half an hour a day is our rule in our home, or maybe an hour a day on the weekend, and then of course bedtime settings as well, privacy settings there, and then the last one is just basically navigating some of the things that we want to make sure that they can't have access as well with a simple finder.
This is really handy when you have e-learning days, because sometimes you have to allow them to go to multiple sites to do research, and so even if there's a pop-up ad on the side of a site that they have to go to, which you've okayed, they can't get out of that site. Does that make sense? So you're really keeping them confined to what they're really needing to see.
Yeah, so you might be on a page, but a banner pops up. Well, the banner is going to be empty. It's going to say restricted because it's trying to access another website that you haven't allowed. So that's a great point. And Apple does a good job, I think, of making it so you as a parent don't have to go back into parental controls and click and click and click and type and type and type and give a blood sample. It's just pretty simple. When the website comes up that you want to approve, you just type in your passcode and it approves it, and now it's permanent unless you want to go back into restrictions later on and disapprove it,
Right.
which sometimes we do after e-learning days. How many of your schools are using e-learning days? Okay, so this is a very appropriate conversation because now it's just going to be even more common that your kids are going to have to use those devices, and you might not have the luxury of being around them during that time when they're doing their homework. So that's the laptops, that's the computers that we have in our kitchen. I might say here, just as another point, devices like laptops, like iMacs or computers should never be in the basement. They should never be in a private space of the house. We keep ours in the den so that the kids can be walked in on easily. We make sure that they never take these devices to their bedroom, especially something like a laptop. They've got all kinds of restrictions. There's not much they can do with it, but at the same time, we just want to create this concept that technology doesn't go into a private space. Technology is to be used in a public space until they're old enough and they can figure out what they want to do with their life after they become parents and independents and no longer need us. Then they can make those decisions. But in our home, those devices are not going to be part of their bedroom time.
Can you talk about the triple click? How you
I will. I have a video for it in a little bit. Yeah. She's thought
Sorry.
this through. She's something else. She's good looking too. So that's the computer. Now let's talk a bit about the actual smartphone or iPhone in this case. This is me setting some restrictions. Again, in the general settings, you'll go to your restrictions, you enable your restrictions, and now you have to set yourself a restrictions passcode. This is not the passcode you use to get into your phone. This is a restrictions passcode. Now I'm going to toggle off what I don't want them to have access to. You might say you want them to have access to some of these things. That's fine. I'm saying I don't want them to be on iTunes because of explicit music. I don't want them to be looking at iBooks because there's a lot of softcore porn on iBooks store. So there's a lot of things I want to restrict here. All this is available to me through the restrictions. This is a very important part of parenting when it comes to the devices that your kids have, because there are a ton of restrictions that come for free with your phone that you can set. Things like explicit language, things like explicit content. Again, you can also, in your iPhone, restrict to certain websites. This is for the iPad as well. So if you're thinking iPad, all these settings are pretty much the same in the iOS that's used on an iPad. So again, I love the way that Apple's done this. Now, do I want more control? Do I want to go and stock a whole lot more? Sure. I'm hoping that comes down the pipe in the years to come. But for now, I'm very grateful for these things that I can make sure that my child can't change the settings to our contact list. I don't want them to change location settings. I want to have oversight. I want to have control over all that. Our kids can do very little with the devices that we give them, except play the apps that we've approved. And really, honestly, that's kind of all they want to do. It's just that when they get curious, I don't want that curiosity being a damaging thing. I want them to be able to have those boundaries set around them. And we talk about these things too from time to time, and I'll give you a bit of an example about that here in a second. So again, this animation is on FMC Parenting. It's actually already there right now, so if you've got something to do, you can go, and all this is there. But this animation may help you later if you want to navigate how to set your parental restrictions on your own device. Now, what Tanya asked a few minutes ago is, what if you want to lock them into an app? You want to give them their iPad, but you don't want them to be able to play games because it's e-learning time. Or you want them, before bed to be reading their Bible devotional app rather than, playing, Minecraft.
Or even on your own phone, right?
Even on your own phone. So you have a doctor's appointment, you're in the doctor's office, but you want to just restrict them to one app. This is a tip as to how to do that. It's called guided access. Again, you're going to go into the settings, you're going to go into general, and you're going to click accessibility. This is going to take you down to what's called guided access at the very, very, very bottom. And you're going to turn guided access on if it's not already on. Again, you're going to have passcode settings that allow you to be able to control that specifically rather than just the settings to get into your phone. You can set time limits here. I'm going to show you an example of how I do this in the app Epic, which is a reading app that my son and my daughters use. With a triple click of the home button at the bottom, I can activate the guided access. I can click the options and make sure they can still access the volume and the sleep wake button. I can set a time limit of 15 minutes or whatever time limit I choose so that they're not in the app forever, but they're only able to use it for a certain amount of time. And then once I click start, now it's locked. That home button, they can click it all they want. It's not going to work because now if they want to get back in, they have to use the code. Well, they don't know the code. Only I know the code. And so now they're locked in, and if you click the button 3 times, you see that message at the top. It says triple click the home button. So my son's in there, triple click it as much as he can, but he doesn't know the passcode. So he's locked in it. He can't get out of it. And this is important, again, if you want to restrict him to one activity on the app and you want to use it for some maybe educational or spiritual purpose. So again, this animation is on FMC Parenting, and you can take a look at it a little bit later if you want to set that on your own phone. I want to talk about a specific experience that we had recently, and I think some of you that have older kids may indeed have had the same experience, and that's when you start navigating specific apps that your kids want, okay? They've been at school, they've heard about this cool app, and it might be something simple like Minecraft, it might be something a little bit more specific like Club Penguin or some children-based social networking app that really does now put you out there that now people that you don't know are now interacting with your kids. And most time they're children, but this requires a step of faith because you have to figure out, okay, now do I allow this? What kind of restrictions are in place from the company's point of view? In the case of Club Penguin, you've got Disney involved. What's Disney's purpose? You know, Disney's there to make money. They want to make a lot of money off of your child, but at the same time, they want to be responsible. And so homework might be needed to kind of figure out what kind of restrictions do they place on things. And I'll give an example of Club Penguin, and I know that they've recently released a brand new experience through some of their apps, but I did some research on that and found out they actually pay quite a few people to always be in the app, talking to or making sure that the kids are using appropriate guidelines and obeying the restrictions the app has. And so that put my mind at ease that there was always oversight. It wasn't just automated. It wasn't just an algorithm doing the work. But I wanted to check in and see if there was any horror stories and find out if there were any stories that I needed to be aware of because, you know, where there's smoke, there's fire. And so I started to look into things like that. These are things that require your time. And again, I wish I could tell you today that this is just easy and again, subscribe to something, it'll always fix it for you. It's kind of like youth pastors. You know, youth pastors can't fix your kids. That's actually up to you as a parent to work with your child to help them learn about Christ and lead them to the understanding of Jesus. The youth pastor is there to support you in doing that. And that's the same thing with all the reviews and the different websites that we're recommending today. But really, it is going to take you taking some time to understand the app itself. Recently, my oldest daughter came to me and wanted to understand this app. And how many of you have heard of Musical.ly by chance? Okay, a good number of you. So this app, if I didn't know anything about it, my daughter would have educated me. Dad, it is so fun. We can sing songs, and they record the song, and it's kind of like lip syncing. And don't we have a rule that you don't play apps at any friend's house without our permission? Well, yeah, but it's fun. So again, learning moment. This is not what we do. We call it the trust bank. You know, you build up trust in the trust bank, and then you withdraw trust from the trust bank, and then you lose privileges. So I said we're going to have to do a withdrawal there because you've broken our trust in that regard. But we talked about it, and she was persistent. This app is great. It's fantastic. And again, what I do for a living is study these things, so I know a lot more than she does. But I pretended to be dumb because I wanted to see what she thought the app did. So she was so persistent. She wanted it on her iPad. She wanted to be able to have it. She loves music. All my daughters enjoy singing and enjoy that whole world. So what I did is I downloaded the app and knew exactly what I was going to get when I downloaded it. And I always recommend, again, always download the app as a parent first and try to find the stuff that you would want them to find. Didn't take long, like nanosecond for me to find sexualized content, explicit sexualized content. Not only nudity or semi-nude imagery, but to find young girls literally singing lyrics about masturbation, lyrics about sending nude pictures to their boyfriend. Just worldview stuff that is not consistent with a biblical worldview that we teach our children. So I knew that that was on there. I didn't download it for me. I downloaded it as a teachable moment for my child. The cool part about this experience is that when I took it to my daughter and I said, I downloaded Musical.ly, what do you think she did? Very happy. Dad is smart now. He has figured out that the world's much better when I'm in control, right? So I said, so sweetie, I'd like to kind of walk through how to use it. Oh, I know how to use it, Dad. I'm like, no, let's just open it up. I said, I just want to show you somebody that I just followed. The image was graphic. It wasn't nude, but it was graphic. And my daughter's face went from enthusiasm and excitement to shame. And she did exactly what the book, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, she went like this. Dad, don't. And I felt bad. I really did. I felt genuinely bad that I'd hurt my daughter, but I immediately embraced her. And I started weeping. I said, honey, what kind of a father would I be if I gave you this app? And she, as to Tanya's point, isn't a talker. So 52 minutes later, the pillow's wet. I've sat there and rubbed her back. I haven't left. I'm not on my phone doing emails while she cries. I'm sitting there just being patient because she's my daughter. And when she got her life together in her 11-year-old brain, she said, I don't want that app. And, we talked about it, why, and she said, it's inappropriate, and she tried to defend, I wouldn't look for that stuff, Dad. I wouldn't go to that stuff, Dad. I wouldn't watch that stuff, Dad. And I'm like, I want to believe you. I do. But you see, you're my daughter and you're my wife's daughter. And your mommy and daddy, we have a sexual libido. We have been curious our childhood about sex. And so genetically, you're kind of screwed. Because you're our child and you're going to be curious about sexuality. And we want you to figure this out God's way, not the world's way. And this app is the world's way. So then we talked about sex. And we went completely further in that topic than we've ever gone before because of this app. We talked about what it means to advertise, and I have this phrase, and it sounds really mean, but I say only used cars have to advertise. You never open the paper and see a Lamborghini, 50% off this week only. Come on down, Ferraris don't have to advertise; they're priceless. And said, honey, you're a Ferrari. You don't need to advertise. You are gorgeous. You're just like your mama. You're perfect. But we're going to keep you in the zone of focusing on what God wants for your sexuality. So it was a great, great springboard, and it started through this app. We don't have that app on our devices. But I do a lot of this oversight with apps, and I put this all on the website too, and there's Snapchat and Instagram, WhatsApp. Meet Me is the #1 app in Fort Wayne right now being used to lure children into human trafficking, so that's an app we want to be aware of. We won't have time to go through all the apps today, but that's an example of how the curiosity and the desire to have these things turned into a 90-minute conversation.
Yeah, and I'm trying to see it more as these devices as a room, right? If we had the ability to allow our kids to play in this room, but behind one door was pornography, and behind another door was drugs, and behind another door was a stranger that was going to kidnap them, would we let them play in that room? And so I really am trying to see it that every time I hand that device over, is it a safe room? Is it a safe place to go? And I am thankful that I have him to keep us, but really asking those questions as parents and knowing that the dangers are at their fingertips.
Yeah. We're going to take remaining time here to answer your questions. Before I do that, I want to give you those resources that I talked about. Here's a couple of review websites that I'm a big fan of. Both of them, they'll want to get into your pocketbook by way of a subscription, but you can steal some stuff for free, and I do regularly. I have to give my email address, which is a kind of a currency in itself, I suppose. But Common Sense Media does a great job of it. These are not faith-based websites. Most of you know about Plugged In on Focus on the Family. That's good. It's not great, in my opinion. It doesn't do all that it should. And Common Sense actually has a pretty good Philippians 4:8 filter, even though they never say that. So I recommend Common Sense Media. I also recommend TeenSafe. TeenSafe is a hardware company. They want you to buy some stuff from them, equipment-wise, but both of them are sites that you might want to check out. Again, you'll see this on the website later if you want to refer to it after this afternoon. Other services that you could use, OpenDNS, which is now owned by Cisco, and many of you probably know Covenant Eyes. Covenant Eyes is good, and it does also have a subscription. Some filtering. I want to be very frank, I don't use Covenant Eyes, nor do I understand Covenant Eyes the way it should. It is a good tool. Some of you use it. In fact, who has Covenant Eyes in your home? Just, okay, a couple of you. If you that put your hand up could stay around, and we'll give those that might be curious about Covenant Eyes a chance to talk to you. But the hardware I want to introduce you to today, I'm grateful. My friend Bart, who's over here, approached me a year ago, about a year ago, and I was honored because he'd been kind of watching us at Remedy, and he's in the space of creating hardware technologies to help families be safe, actual products. And he came to me with a tool that he created. Safeguard is the name of his company. And this is a piece of equipment that we use in our home to be able to do a variety of things. Filtering is the biggest one, the easiest one. Blocking inappropriate websites. Again, you already saw how I block everything anyway, so I block and then I double block with the filtering. But this blocks even the stuff that we would be searching for on our devices. It's an incredible piece of equipment because it not only does that, but it gives reports to parents, and I think Bart's heart, what I love about him is that he wasn't just circle the wagons, but it was a conversation starter. Scheduled reports, you can see what kids are looking for in your home, what kinds of things they're trying to get to. That's a great conversation starter, even though you might not like it. It's messy, it's hard, it's important, and it's necessary. And then the other thing that I really love about this, and Bart's going to have to speak to this more at his table afterwards, but when you leave the home with the devices that we have, the smartphones, you know that it goes from the Wi-Fi signal to the cellular signal now. Now you're out in the cellular world. You may have had your Wi-Fi blocked and the website's blocked there, but what about when Joey's over at Sam's house and now he's using the Verizon phone or the AT&T or Sprint phone? Well, this technology can also do some blocking in that regard. So now you're blocking when they're out and about and their device can't access things. Or if there is any kind of curiosity, there can be some reporting to back that up. You can find out about it and you can be able to have that conversation with your child about what's going on. So Bart is here today, which I'm grateful you are. He's got a table in the back. He gives a special discount to my friends from Remedy because he believes in our organization. It's his way of donating to our cause. And so today there's a significant break on the price. I believe it's regularly $200 or so. So he knocks off $75 for you. I am going to be just blunt. I don't make a buck off this, but you would do this if you had a need in your house for home insurance or auto insurance. And this is why this tool is so important, because it does give you that peace of mind that things are being blocked and things are being able to be talked about. So you might not be able to do it today, but do indeed talk to Bart if you're curious about that following our time together, because I'm a big believer in the product. And we talked before the time here today, and he's geeking out with me about him and his partner and how they're looking at technologies now that can auto-recognize nude images in a texting conversation, so that sexting can be monitored and alerted so that mom and dad can be aware of that unfortunate event. And just so you know, 70% of kids are sexting in today's culture. It's the new first base. You know, when I was in high school, you know, you get with a girl and you've got that back seat, and I won't go into the details, but there was a first base. You wanted to get to it. Sexting is the new first base. I'm not going to date you unless you show me the goods. You know, I want to know what I'm getting into here. So we have to know how to monitor this, and Bart's geeking out to make it possible. Great partner to the parents. So I'm grateful for you, Bart. What questions do we have, sweetie, that we can cover here in the last 15 minutes or so?
So yeah, a lot of parents are asking, what is an age that you would recommend buying your children a device or a cell phone for the first time.
Is it possible we have a different answer?
Yes, we both do.
Well, why don't you go first?
My answer is when they're driving. I would like for that to be when they're 16.
Like Mario Kart driving, or?
Actually driving their own vehicle for the first time. And so if there is an emergency, and it would be really restricted just for calling or texting. So that would be my response.
And I think it's a great response, and she is beautiful. And godly. I say 13, and I say it because I'm Mr. Lockdown. I know way too much about this stuff, so I'm not as nervous or worried about it. And again, I know that it's not an entitlement issue. I'm not trying to make sure that because Joey has it, that Duke should have it. But I am aware that these kids live in a world now where this is not going away. And I'd rather teach them how to use things appropriately than run away as far as I can and move to Montana. So we have a bit of a different opinion on this. We're still very much in love.
Yes.
But you will have to have this conversation with you and your spouse. Yes?
So just because they have a cell phone doesn't mean it has to be a smartphone.
Exactly.
Right.
It could be a flip phone.
17 and he's still gonna have his own smartphone.
Sure.
For one, he's gonna have to pay for it.
Yeah.
And two, is he just doesn't, he doesn't need it.
Yeah, that's great, Joy. One thing I didn't say that's important is that, and this you would get this if we did the Trends and Teens workshop, is the contract that comes with the phone, with the smartphone. And it's a pretty sophisticated deal. They have to hire an attorney. It's a lot of money on their part. But it does basically say, we own the phone. We can get into everything. Here's the passcodes that you have to give us for everything. It changes the game a bit, but it is important. And it's amazing how many parents don't even think about that. Well, I guess I do pay for the phone. I should be able to access it. So there's a lot of things that you'll need to do if you make that decision.
I think another reason too that I prefer later is just the balance that we talked about earlier. It's really hard because the kids just want to be on it all the time. So if you hand it over, at a young age or even, 13, how are they going to say, okay, 5 minutes here and then I'm going to put it down? Are they really going to do that? And so I think that addiction can even start then, where they feel like they can't be divided from their phone. And just the idol that comes with that. And so that's where I would really want to prolong that to a more mature brain in my mind. So yeah, we'll hit that when we're 13, I guess. So more to come.
Pray for us. What's another one?
Let's see. Let's do YouTube. Let's do this one.
So YouTube, it's a mess. YouTube is believe it or not, YouTube is the #1 place where kids get their music. I didn't say movies, there's TV, I said music. Because they don't want to pay for it, and they're actually getting a little bit conscious about the pirating thing, so they watch the lyric videos and they listen to the music on YouTube. As I can probably testify to, and you guys know, YouTube is riddled with all kinds of semi-porn in regards to the nudity that's out there. Now,
Or education on how to do
yeah,
anything.
how to do
Yeah.
anything, how to have oral sex, how to have anal sex. There's a lot of stuff on there that you just, as a parent, you'd never give a gateway to. There is a YouTube Kids app now that we use a lot, and it's good. I've actually been quite shocked. I know more about Shopkins than I ever knew before. But that would be something to look into. I don't feel good about YouTube. My kids having access to it, so they don't have access to it. And there's really very little way to monitor YouTube in regards to what they could get into, because if they don't log in their Google account, then they can kind of go wherever they want. You still have the history of your web browser to fall back on, but
And Safeguard
kids
would
are smart.
still monitor that for you.
Exactly.
So-
Safeguard could monitor that for you. That you don't want to say, well, go for it on YouTube, and Safeguard will help me out and find out the pieces later. You still have to be smart about the content on these websites. But yeah, you would indeed be able to have a conversation about what they're looking for.
And that's where it's really important to know where that device is, or if they're on YouTube for, looking for something specific, make sure that you're next to them or they're in a place that anyone could be walking by, depending on how old they are. If
Yep.
they're, 17, just helping them with that accountability.
We're always present. One of us is always present when they have an assignment that requires a YouTube or a Google, because we know that it only takes a moment. What's the other questions? Ray?
Well, a lot of the teen apps, you can talk about a Trends and Teens.
Yeah,
workshop.
Teens apps, those are already on the website if you want to look at those later. In fact, if you have your phones out right now, Let's do this. Let's have you, some of you have already done this, but I'll just share with you how to do it real quickly here. If you, so that number 494949 that we've been using, if you now text the word SEED, S-E-E-D, which some of you have already done, but do it again just today to get this link. If you text the word SEED, not talk like we usually do on Sunday mornings, but SEED, you'll get the link to the page that has all these videos and all the app reviews and all the stuff that I just have been talking about. And you can look at that later today, and maybe that'd be a good conversation to have with your teenager if you've got it. Top apps you need to be looking out for. Snapchat is the #1 most popular app out there. Still being used for that inappropriate capturing between boyfriend and girlfriend or stranger and stranger. #1 app being used by sex predators in our community is Meet Me, and then Kik is closely behind it, the Kik Messenger. Both apps have no purpose on your children's devices. They're riddled with bullying, cyberbullying, a lot of predators. Give you a quick example. Meet Me used in our parenting workshop with the FBI. 90-minute workshop, at least 20 solicitations within a 5-mile radius for nude images from the 13-year-old girl that we're pretending to use in the app that the FBI agent uses to kind of capture these idiots. So this is happening in Fort Wayne. This isn't Chicago. This is here. And so please be aware that these apps don't belong there, and they're all on the website.
There's one woman that her daughter was caught up in sex trafficking, and they remarkably found her within 24 hours and were able to get her out of that situation. But I just wanted to share this with you because one thing that she said when asked, what would you have done differently leading up to her, turning 16 and entering this? And the one thing that she said was, I wish I would have gotten deeper into a church community where she was in and around other families that were marking her and making an influence on her and caring for her, having those deep conversations, and just families that were there supporting her and making it feel more normal that she's making good decisions rather than normal that she's pursuing an avenue that would lead down sex trafficking. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to encourage you guys as parents that we don't have to do this alone, and that the more that we do this alongside other families and other friends that are pursuing God's path, the easier this is going to be on you. And I believe that that's how God wanted it to be, that we're in community and supporting each other through the hard times and through the easy times, from the time that we get caught up in this and see that our child saw something that we didn't want them to see, and just being free to say those things, that we have a soft place to land in each other.
Let me just quickly go through some of these questions. There's some really good ones here. I already shared that.
You want me to read them?
Well, no, yeah.
Your arm's not quite long enough. Which one?
No, I'm going to fake it.
Okay.
How to track your child's movements, location services through that parental restrictions settings I shared with you. If you're on a family plan, you can track them, and you can block it so they can't change that, so you can still track them. Again, in the next year, I'm sure Bart's going to make it so that we can track them, and they can sense their emotions at the time, and we can plant messages in their head,
pressure.
Things like that. So we're excited about what he comes up with. Talked about navigating websites. Teen-driven app I've already shared is Snapchat for sure, but Meet Me is something to always watch out for. Kik, those two are big ones. Whisper is another one. Tinder. These are dating apps, but they're being used. Glenbrook Mall. This is a situation. 50-year-old man pretending to be a 16-year-old boy. Because it's GPS based, notices some girls that are at the mall hanging out. Hey, let's meet in the parking lot, pretending he was 16. Met them. Oh, he couldn't be here. I'm his uncle. Come with me. I'll buy you booze. We'll party. Girls were smart. Didn't go with them. But that's the kind of scenarios that apps like Tinder are part of in our community. I already showed you how to limit or control usage time through parental controls. How much violence in games is too much for an 8-year-old? I think my rule, and first of all, again, it's a great conversation to have, that although it's a video game, it can still change the way you think about other people. So that conversation should precede and also be done during. We don't allow any games that show blood or show any like arms popping off or heads popping off. We do kill a lot of stormtroopers in our house. And then now the stormtroopers are killing rebels, which doesn't make sense.
No, it's not right.
Why is Vader getting so much press? But we do have games, but Duke and I spent a lot of time talking about that and the boundaries in regards to the physical. I didn't say this, but I think you guys get it. Every device now out there is Wi-Fi enabled these days. So the PlayStation isn't a gaming console, now it's a web browser as well. So your child could get on, so parental controls has to be on everything. It has to be on your Apple TV, it has to be on your Roku, it's got to be on your PlayStation, your Xbox, your Wii. You just got to do it on everything. And is it inconvenient when you want to use it for whatever yeah, it is, but it's part of the package. You're trying to raise your children in a way that they understand that there's boundaries to the way that they do things. So everything needs to have parental restrictions. And there are some apps that don't do a good job of this. I'm going to be careful here because I think I might be wrong, but I can't say that Hulu has been very cooperative with parental controls. And you know that, right?
I don't know that.
You don't know the answer? Anyone know if I'm wrong or right on that one? I think Hulu is behind the curve on this one. Netflix is okay, but Hulu is a bit. So check into that if you use Hulu, because there's some content on there you might not want your kids watching.
Can you talk at all about the brain, the development of the brain?
Yeah, well, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I would say that obviously the chemicals, the neurochemicals that are released in your child's brain using these devices and using apps, and especially if they engage in pornography at a young age, it's the same chemical that God gave us to create connection to our spouse. And so that's why, quote unquote, addiction occurs so early and so young, because you're literally fused to the images, you're fused to the practice. If you're masturbating to it, it's even more difficult for a child to navigate, because now you've got the dopamine from the to the other feeling of euphoria during the actual orgasm. So it's just a mess, and that's why we have to be so careful that we don't just see it as media. We see it as the fact that our child's brain is a supercomputer, and it can get a virus really easily and really quickly when it gets this stuff into our heads. Innocence robbed is that there's no reset button. I saw porn, I told you guys a few months ago, at 8 years old, because my dad wanted me to see it. He thought that'd be the best way for me to grow up and not be queer. That's what he said. Well, I grew up a queer. Not a queer by his definition, but a queer that I couldn't look at anybody the same way. I was addicted immediately to sex and to pornography. And it became a very difficult thing for me to navigate my childhood, especially my marriage. In the first, as you know, I was divorced. I didn't know how to think of sex in an appropriate way. And by the grace of God, healed of that. But same struggle of how your brain can get reprogrammed at such a young age. These apps can do that really, really easily. So I think I've covered the rest of them. If I didn't, please come up and talk to us. We are going to offer this again at 11:30, exactly the way we just did it. Again, you don't have to come back if you don't want to, but you might want to if there's something more you want to learn about a specific topic. But I'm grateful that you're here, that you're in the game. We've got to be in the game, parents. We have no choice in this one. So I'm going to pray for you. We're going to pray for you and ask the Lord to be the guide in all this. Jesus, thank you that you are purity, your holiness, you're perfect. When we're in you, Lord God, you give us the power and the hope to overcome all these schemes of the devil. And we know the way the story ends. You have victory. You're triumphant. The cross defeats all these things. We get it. We love it. We live by it. But God, help us to be a discerning parent, to be wise, to be able to navigate this world that seems to change at exponential rates sometimes. Help us to be the kind of parents that don't look at this as something that's just happening around us, but may it be something that happens within us. I pray for marriages in this room that have been affected by pornography. I pray for relationships that have been devastated by the kind of content we're talking about, and for the children that have been touched by it too. Lord, forgiveness is always available. Redemption is always possible. And second chances and third chances are always your way of doing things. I'm grateful for that, God. Help us not to write off our children for making mistakes, nor write off the opportunities to help them in the future. But God, allow us to have these conversations with power, with strength, and by the power of your Holy Spirit. In Jesus' name.